Hi everyone, this is Kathy. Thanks so much for joining in for the events workflow section of the workshop. I'm recording this, so it will be posted on our service desk. Also on the service desk is a pre-recorded micro-learning session on the events topic. And please don't forget, we're here to help you out on a one-on-one basis as you are implementing this yourself. So just hit us up on the service desk via a training request. And what you'll see me do in this session, everyone, is follow an order as it comes into the lab all the way through. So let me set that up.
An order comes into the lab, you're going to see me trigger that, or actually submit the order via the command importer. And then, so that's going to be the trigger that actually does some cool things. Actually, it's the command file that contains the trigger statement that says, hey, trigger the order received events. And then it's the order received events, you guys, that contain the code, the script. We call it actions that actually do the good things. So you're going to see an email being sent. I'll show you that email. You're going to see a report printing, or at least it'll attempt to print on my system. I'll show you the report manually. And then I'll assume that, okay, the order is in, images have been cropped and optimized, and then I'll start rendering some jobs. So I'll export images from the export images dialog box, and that interface will trigger my export images events that create a zip file and then send that zip file to the customer. So that will be good. Send the email with the zip file. That's step number 4 here. And then I will set the status of the order to shipped. And that's another event that I have in the system. And when that gets triggered, just by setting the status to order, I'll show you the new optimized set order status dialog. It really doesn't look anything, and you saw that in the kind of did you know video. If you saw that we've simply optimized that for barcode scanning, and then that will do something too. That will send an email, and I think that automatically updates an order status as well. So we have resources. We never want you to think in these sessions, whether it be a micro learning session or this workshop session, that this is your be-all, end-all chance for information. We know it takes so much more than just these brief 45-minute or hour-long sessions together. So we hope you guys are very comfortable and confident. We hope you know that we are here for you. Of course, there's going to be dp2 help when you upgrade to 20.3 or version 21 as soon as it becomes available. There'll be the traditional what's new document, so you'll be reminded of things that are new in the system. We're recording these sessions. We have the micro learning recordings that we've done, and we're going to do more micro learning sessions as well. You guys know that during our live workshops, which this is not, it's virtual, but during a 2-day live workshop, we can offer you so much more, right? The programmers can do a scripting class. We know that that's important information, a great topic for you programmers or programmer types to tap into. So that will be a micro learning session that's forthcoming. We don't know exactly when, but we want to keep this learning and engagement platform, these platform opportunities rolling, not only in the form of these workshops, but in our micro learning sessions as well. And then you know that you can always hit us up with a one-on-one training request. So here we go, guys. I am in dp2, and I'm going to load the taskbar here and go to categories and go to this short list of events. We love these short lists, don't we, in dp2? They're usually so long. This is very manageable. We have an event manager table. We have an email manager. That's how we're going to actually send emails. This session won't get too heavily into emails and customizing emails, but I did a micro learning session earlier in the year, you guys, on emails and customizing emails as well. So that was a hot topic, and you can find that micro learning session on our service desk. But again, And you'll hear me say it a lot, this will never be your be-all, end-all. We cram so much information into a 45-minute or a 60-minute time slot during these sessions with you guys that commonly we just kind of intend it to be a teaser for you and a high-level overview so that you can conceptually grab onto a couple of things and say, hey, I know that's going to help me. I have no idea how to implement it, but I know that's going to help me. That's what we want you to get out of these sessions. We want you to upgrade. We're there to help you with your implementation. So let me open up this Event Manager tab. I have all of those pieces that I shared with you in my PowerPoint. So I have this order received series of events, and then I have export images. I even have a digital download rendered, and then I have order shipped, and I have this printer batch error event that can trigger maybe an email, maybe a text message to someone in the lab if a printer error is encountered. I'm going to show you how to set these up from scratch, but I usually save that to the end. I like to show you, first of all, how things work, some working examples, cruise through an order, follow it around the lab, and make good things happen. And then I like to dissect things in a little bit further detail after that and show you how to set it up. So there's this cool filter, and I'm not going to tell you everything, every step of the way. Again, it's designed to be conceptual, high level. I'll cover some finer details as I'm setting some of these up from scratch toward the tail end of this session. So I'm going to start with order received. It's just a cool filter, guys, so that you can kind of dissect this visually in pieces and in chunks. So I've already set these up. I mean, I'm going to show you how to set these up, but you know how to add records to dp2. You know, it's a right click, it's an add, it's a new. You know, dp2 always will tell you what's required if you go to save it and you don't know what's required or what's not. So you know dp2 is kind of helping you along the way, but I will set these up from scratch. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to trigger these order received events. And I'm going to trigger it, guys, by running a command file. And that command file actually contains in it a trigger statement that says trigger order received events. So those two things are going to happen. And then the real substance is here in the action column. You know, for those of you that are not scripting in dp2 and you don't know what, you know, include class or, you know, return this result or run this report, you know, if these lines of code don't make sense to you, that's okay. You don't have to know how to write this stuff, because there are ways where you right click and we populate some really cool things for you. Most of the things I'll be covering are populated for you with a right click. You choose the action and the right scripts, the right executables, the right information gets populated in this action column for you. But for those of you who are taking a look at this and you're just dying to add to it and make it do something else and use your know-how and use your scripting knowledge, absolutely, you can go for it. And there's lots of ways for you guys to edit this action that's in the column and open it up in an editor. So there's, for those of you who, you know this, knows scripting, you know, I kind of like to share some trickle and pieces of information for your programmers along the way. But for you non-programmers, I always just like to say, don't worry about that part. You don't have to be a programmer. That's one nice thing about having the event capability now inside of dp2 is you don't have to be a programmer to do it all yourself. So I'm going to shrink these lines up. And the cool thing about this too is you can just see me doing some things and say, oh, well, that's cool. Look at, that's how I can, you know, increase the size of these rows. Is just a quick drag and drop. Another cool thing that I like to remind you that you guys can do is you can take a screenshot of something that I'm showing you that's of interest or of value. Just, you know, hit your print screen. You can use your phone, right? Take a picture to something that you see that you want to be reminded of. Maybe it's just a reminder to say, okay, I'm going to submit a problem report and ask a question about this. or I'm going to request training because I know I need help doing this exact same thing that I'm seeing right now on this webinar screen. So, all right, so let me open up a command file here that I have. I'm just going to drag this into my process commands directory that I have running here. And then I'm just going to open up a work queue to show you guys what actually happened by me doing that. So because the command file contains a trigger command that says at the bottom of the file or somewhere in the file, it basically says trigger order received event ID. Well, in this case, the order received event ID is three things. It's going to print a report. You decide what report you want to print. I'll talk a little bit about this workflow type report that is new in the system. We're not loading it in dp2, but we can help you with these workflow reports and scripts to update your system manually. I'll show you what I mean by that. Hang on to that for just a second. It's also going to send an email. I don't know, I think just the basic order received email that ships with dp2. We give you default emails to start with: order received, order shipped. You can customize those, of course, with our email HTML tools. And then the last thing this will do, there's a sequence in which these events can take place if you use them. They can run in parallel if they have the same sequence, or you can purposefully indicate a sequence. If you don't want one of these events to initiate until after a certain one is completed, you can use these two columns in concert with each other, and there's a number of retries as well. Well, they're just sitting here in a queue. This remote work queue, the one I'm using is the main queue that's here. And the reason they're just sitting here in a ready state is because this worker, all right, so these are basically four of the buttons that you have available to you on the events taskbar. I have the event manager table open, I have a work queue open, I have a worker running. That's the start worker here. So we're pretty much covering almost everything except the email manager. I am going to make some assumptions during this session that the emails have already been set up and are good to go. So let me just run this. Let me run this worker, and you can see things happening immediately. So it completed the order received workflow report. You can see on my system that it's trying to print it. I'm not actually connected to a printer, and it wouldn't be very helpful if I printed it anyway. I can't show you that. So what I'm going to do is manually run that report on my system so that I can show you what the report looks like. But you can obviously see that it was attempting to print that report. It sent an email to my Kodak Alaris address saying that the order has been received. And then it went ahead and updated that status for me. So let me just pull up the order here. I ran a test order 14. I'll try to keep things neat and clean and tidy along the way. My habits are not very good, but I will try to be better with you guys on the line. Here's my order data table. By the way, you might notice that opened up all the way to the right, small size. It's one of the windows in dp2 where you do have the ability to remember your window location. I just like to point that out because some of you might say, well, that looks strange that Kathy's order data table opened up that size. So that event did set the status in the order to color correct. That's what this event was actually showing here. And then let me go out to my email. This is the email that got sent. And I do like this reminder that comes up, you guys. Very important for you to understand that our sample emails in the system that you can work with and are really good to go right out of the chute. We don't want you to use those in production because each time you upgrade dp2, we'll use those same report names. They'll be overwritten. So we would not want you to put your due diligence and hard work into one of our sample templates and then only to have us overwrite that. That would be awful. So that's why we give you this big bold message that says copy this, and to copy it, you select one, you select the other, you right click and you say copy contents, and you give it your own lab, prefix or whatever you want to call it. So this should serve to you as you're doing your testing, we think, as a great visual reminder to not let these out to your customers in production. I could give you all the detail on that by showing you guys, but I feel like that kind of breaks the sequence here. So again, grasp onto that at a high level, and whether you get the details around this out of the micro learning session on that I did on emails, or better yet, let's connect. Let's just set this up live on your system and just do some one-on-one training there. So okay, so those 3 order received events have been accomplished. So how are you guys doing so far? Let me pause here and see if you guys, if anyone wants to raise a hand. I'm kind of slowing down now just so that I can look at you. Well, look at your name on my participant panel to see if, now I don't necessarily know in which order. Okay, they went down. So maybe you guys had your hand up from before. So I don't see anybody's hands. But I really invite you guys, even if it's, I'll ask a couple more times, okay? And I would love to open it up to a comment or a question at some point. But certainly, please continue to use that question/chat box. You really do both in the same box in this webinar. You guys, you can type in a comment, type in anything you want. It can be a question, it can be a comment, and anything that you want. Go ahead and continue to use that. And I know that Sue is continuing to monitor that while I'm going through this. Okay, well, I will ask again, and I will hold out hope that you guys will let me open up your phone line at some point.
We do have 2 people with their hands up.
Okay, so they are up. I did look and I didn't see them. I'm sorry.
Well, remember I told you earlier I had the same problem. So
yeah,
I
don't see anybody. I saw a couple of hands up, but then they went down. So I'm looking right now and I don't see any hands up. Do you, Sue?
I do. I can call the person.
They're not coming through on mine. So if you can open up the phone line, that would be great. I don't see them. That's fine.
All right, I'm going to open it up for Lauren. Lauren, you're live. All right, I can't hear her if she's there. Oh, and it says I can't for Kate because it says attendee cannot be unmuted. I don't know why.
Okay, we have to unmute on our end. So what's the name on that?
Oh, she just put her hand back down.
Yeah, Lauren's unmuted on our line. So she might be self-muted. Okay. I think what's happening is a delay, actually, because now I see a hand up, but now I think you said the hand went down. Okay, so are we good for now, do you think, Sue?
I think we're good. Let's keep going.
Okay, that sounds good. So if a question was intended to be asked, you guys, and we're not timely in our opening up the phone line for you, or if there's any issue with the audio, please go ahead and enter your question in the question box, and we'll get to that way too. All right, so the order has been received, and good things automatically happened, right? Events got triggered, and actions, which is the real substance here, took place. Emails got sent, statuses got updated. Well, let's go to like the next likely workflow piece. So let's say the order is in, let's say images have been optimized, images have been cropped and color corrected. And now, let's say, I'll pull it up, I'll pull up the images here. Let's say that we want to export these images. So I'm going to show you, right click on images, you know where to find export images. So in your export images dialog box on the format tab, we have an event ID option for you. There's a tool tip on there that says optionally select one of your event IDs to trigger when the export completes. So remember these guys, it's kind of like 3 steps. You have to set up an event. You have to somehow trigger it. Remember in the command file, I told you there's a trigger statement. I'll show you that if I have a chance in the session, but at a high level, grasp onto that. Well, this would actually be the way to trigger your export or whatever event you choose here when images are exported. I have a destination location set up here. Looks like an order ID folder is going to be created inside of some location. And then I'm using a couple of macros for file name. So I'm going to head and export these. And I do have a render engine running because normal things still need to happen when images are rendered, when export images is used. So things are happening very quickly now, you guys, because I left this worker running. So those images got, first of all, rendered by a render engine because that's a normal piece of the process. And because these export images events were triggered just by having that event ID on my export images dialog box that I showed you on the export tab, then these 3 things happened. The first thing that happened is the images were exported and a zip file was created. And again, you don't have to have your programming skills to do this. When I set these up for you from scratch, I'll show you that you just have to right click and add the appropriate action that will do these things that I'm showing you. Send an email and in this case, zip up a few images and send the email. So those 3 things have been done. The zip was created. The email was sent to me with the zip file. And then once again, the order of the status was updated to, you know, the next status. So I'll just show you back in my email here. If I refresh it, I might not have received it actually yet. I don't think I received it yet actually. So just because I think it's still coming through, I'll just go back to a previous one that I have where the email was sent that says, hey, your zip file is attached. Please download and enjoy. So we could, I'm just going to mute some lines here, you guys. I hear some background noise coming through. Okay, that should be good. So in this case, obviously the zip file could be downloaded and enjoyed, but you can modify any of these emails. In fact, this is one that I had modified and created anyway. So that triggered the export images. Now I have another event in here that's kind of cool, digital download. So this is done in this manner. And again, remember, I'm going to keep on reminding you, take this for what it is. Take it at a high level, you know, grab onto the pieces that are really going to help you in your workflow and let us help you with the implementation. I just don't like anybody to walk out of these sessions saying, oh my gosh, how do I repeat that? We don't necessarily expect that of you at all. So, you know, I'll just keep saying that to remind you. So here's my digital downloads. I have this one. I'll put an image in there and I will render that. I like to just use the R on my keyboard. I'm a very keyboard heavy user of dp2, so I will just run that digital download. Now it's the product itself, you guys. So remember, an event needs to get triggered. And in order to trigger an event, something has to say trigger this. All right, there has to be a way to make the event happen. That's the trigger. So it's my product file itself that actually contains a trigger command. And you know what? I'm not going to wait on this one. I'm going to view this as text, and I'm going to show you guys, for those of you that this, is of interest. In this case, you would need to, call on us or call on your programmer. You guys, if you want to print your screen right now, I mean, this is part of it. This is part of the trigger that basically says cue this event, the digital download rendered event, but also somewhere in here in my output specification, you guys, is this process after keyword. And that's where you'll additionally find that call to trigger the digital download event. So again, a couple more pieces of information. I kind of like to sprinkle it in gradually so that I don't hit you with all the detail at one time. So that got triggered. I did hear my email in this case where I did get that. The digital download file rendered with this image. It triggered those digital download events, one of which was sending this email with that file attached. And then the last thing I'm going to show you guys as part of this workflow is, what's the last one here, is to set my status to order ship. So I hope this makes sense, right? I started by importing in an order, and that triggered order received. I exported some images that zipped up those images, sent the email. I rendered a digital download that sent the email with the digital file attached. Now the order's good to go, and I want to show you how you can do something as simple as setting the status. So I'm just using this select order taskbar to get to this set status window. This was in that Did You Know video that was playing before I got started here, everyone. It was one of our dp2 Did You Know splash screens that simply said, this window has been optimized, where now you can choose a status. And if you were barcode scanning, like a stack of orders with barcodes, you could just leave this status selected as shipped and then scan, scan, scan. So there's really nothing I can show you to, to do that, but I just wanted to call it out and point it out that this is the dialog that has been optimized to automatically, include that carriage return that allows you to scan multiple orders and have the status remain at shipped. But I'm going to do it manually. So here's my test order. Let's see what that status currently is. Looks like the last event that I triggered set the status to finishing. So now this will set the status to shipped. And that is a trigger in and of itself. And again, things do happen quickly, but it just set the status to shipped, and then it sent the email that says, hey, your order has been shipped. And then it looks like it's updating the status one more time. If I refresh this, the status is now complete. So before I move on, first of all, how about just kind of a check-in with me, you guys, with a high five. So I'm not going to call, don't worry, I won't open up your phone line, but is this making sense? You guys find value in this? So is this going to be useful to you guys? I'll take a hand raise in any one of those cases just to kind of do a check-in. And I do see them rolling in, and I never mean to force you guys to, give us your nod on any of this, but I'm glad to see them. I'm very glad to see that, I'm hoping in many cases that does mean that you're going to find this to be valuable for you. All right, so in that case, I will put those hand raises down. And now before I create these from scratch, I just want to show you how to add a couple of these from scratch to give you some, working knowledge under your belt during this session. So before I do that, in this case, does anyone want to put up a hand? And I would open up your phone line for any comments or questions. Georgia, I'm coming to you. I do see that your hand is, Georgina, did you want to add something, Georgina? Okay, maybe that was up from before. I'm sorry. Again, I don't want to put anybody on the spot. But if anybody wants to raise a hand to ask a question, or for any of you who are using it, any of you that have already upgraded to 20.3 and you've already implemented some of this, I'd love to hear from you.
We do have a hand raise.
Okay, go ahead, Sue, if you open that, because I don't have it on my panel.
All right. Matt, you're on.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I was just wondering, are there other options for an email server outside of Gmail? For example, if you're sending out thousands of emails as these are processed in batch, is there a way to connect to a MailChimp or SendGrid or whatever in those email settings?
I'm going to open up my my email manager, and I'll also ask the programmers to step in here too, because I think that question at least deserves in part an opportunity to show you the email manager setup that's inside of dp2, where you could connect to your host of choice. Your email templates can be accessed from here. You can send emails as text messages, but I'll also open that up for Dave and Tom, for you guys to come in on that question too, please.
Yeah, we should work with any SMTP server. It doesn't have to be Gmail. In fact, if it was Gmail, probably would be more of the business side of Gmail than I think the free one.
Right, because we know that has some potential issues. But does this answer your question, or please ask a second part of your question if this does not address it?
No, I think that works. So we would need to identify which other platform we'd like to use. I know when we've tried to send out batch emails through our Google Business, Google Apps for Business account, once you pass, I think 200 in a day, they'll shut it down. So.
And just as a follow-up for our testing, we actually do use SendGrid.
Wonderful. Okay, I'm familiar with that platform. Perfect.
Awesome. Great. Thank you for that question. Are there any other questions? Sue, please help me monitor that hand raise if you would.
We did have a question put in from Janet Oliver.
Thank you. Yes.
If we check the questions grid there.
Can you email and zip images on green screen with the customer selected background attached to it? Yes, because when you export from the export images dialog, we can export those images with the desired background rendered to that image, I believe.
Yep, and we did answer it in the questions window.
Oh, okay, great. Oh, good.
And Janet came back and said, great. There was one more that came in too on the email. It says, or our own URL/server, which I think is
that one too. Yes.
And the answer to that one is also yes.
Great. Okay, thanks for keeping multiple eyes on hands and questions, everybody. I appreciate the help, and I appreciate the questions, everyone, so thank you. Okay, well, you're not going to believe what I'm about to do here, but I'm going to take all of these records, and I'm going to delete them, and I'm going to say this out loud, that I think I have an archive or a backup. And the only reason I say that out loud is because I hope none of you ever speak those same words when you are removing records from your database that you might want back. I hope you never say, gee, I think I have an archive or a backup of these. But then again, you know, my livelihood, guys, does not depend on a few sample records in my database. So the only other comment I have about that is that I hope you all have a really good backup plan of your backup plan. That's kind of a famous saying that we have around here. What's your backup plan of your backup plan? So in my case, I will go ahead and delete those records, no problem. And I will say it again, I think I have an archive of that table, but but I might not, and if I don't, that's okay. So please, and by no means practice what I preach in this case. Have a backup plan of your backup plan. Well, the reason I like to start like this for this next section, where at least I can bring a couple of those items to life from scratch, is just so that I can show you what your clean slate might look like. Because I know many of you on the line, you might have not upgraded to 20.3. You don't have the opportunity for version 21 yet, so we know when you do upgrade to either of these builds, these versions, you'll have an empty event manager table. So I think it's good for you guys to see just how we could do a couple of these things that you saw me demonstrate from scratch. So I'm going to choose new, and I'm going to add back the order received event, one of them anyway. And I'm going to call this send email. This action ID is really just a really brief description. You can see the tooltips. The developers always do a good job in these tables to help you along the way. So many times we can look at a dialogue with buttons and fields and say, what's this? We can say it every single time we see a button or a field. And hopefully you guys are in good habit of hovering over those to see what it is. But this is really just an abbreviated action ID that spells out the real action, which is the code of what happens when this event gets triggered. Category, you can type in your own, or in this case, I'm going to show you how you can manually trigger an event right from your order data table. And I'm going to choose the main queue. I'm pretty sure in a clean install, you guys do have a default queue named main that's available to you. I mean, if you don't have one available to you, you can type one in, and then you might have to also add that in your work queue table. But I'm thinking that you have the main queue by default. And I'm going to enable that. Sequence of one is fine. And then here's where the real heart of the matter comes into play. I haven't even saved it yet. I could have saved it first, but you can see the edit pencil there in the first column. And then under this actions separator, you know, sometimes with our long right click list, and this is not just dp2, but in other applications too, we always have these dividers in very, either in this case short or long lists of functions, and it's just kind of a natural thing that our eye doesn't always pay attention to these very, very helpful dividers and labels. And I don't know why that is, but it happens all the time. And again, it's not a dp2 thing, it's an any application thing. Everybody uses these very helpful headers and dividers to separate a whole bunch of cool stuff in a long list. But for some reason, as users, our eyes tend to like not even pay attention to them. So my only point in mentioning it is to maybe call attention to these kind of menu separators. They're very helpful. So here's some order related actions. I could send an order email. Now you'll only have emails available to you if you've also installed emails as part of your setup. So I only say that because when you get here on your system, if anything shows up empty, you guys, don't stress yourself. Contact us via the service desk, and let's just do some of this stuff together, okay? This is a cool one, like set order status too. You know, I'm just gonna go ahead and set this to, let's say auto balance. So, you know, when an order comes in, I want the order to set. I just expanded that row, you guys. And so that's a real easy one. I mean, we give you all those actions to choose from. So when I trigger an order received event, and I'm going to show you how to manually trigger it with a right click from the order data table, this status will get set to auto balance. I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to send, oh, you know what? I actually called this send email. Well, that's not really an appropriate action for that. I'll say set status. That's a much better appropriate action ID there. This one, I'll send an email. And I'll enable that. You can see how this is kind of cool because I had duplicated my first one. It automatically incremented the sequence up. If you want events to happen in parallel when they're triggered, these sequences could be the same. But in this case, I also copied over the same action to set the status to auto balance. I want a different action. So I'm going back here to order related, order email, order received. I'm just going to send the generic order received sample, and that will replace that action, and I'll save that one as well. So I have a couple of events set up. Pretty easy to do it from scratch. Let me go to, I think I closed my status bar here. I'll go back to that same order that I pulled in. Find it in here. I'll open up the order data table. It remembered the location because I moved it from up here. Clean things up a little bit along the way, you guys. Try to keep it. My window habits are usually not this clean. They might not look clean, but they're pretty clean right now. So I want to show you this trigger that's manually available to you. You know, because as you're getting things set up and as you want to test things, and does your email server work? Is, you know, are things happening the way you really want them to happen in production? Well, this is a great way to manually trigger that event. So let me see, trigger order event. I'll trigger the order received event. And I believe that will trigger that order received event. Let me see, let me do that again.
There's an I before E except after C problem. In other words, you're looking at the previous order received there because you haven't reopened that window.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
And you can leave it that way. Just go reopen the orders window and you should see this extra one in there.
Yeah, I was expecting to see that one in there. Trigger order received. I did put it in the order category.
Did you reopen that window?
I did, a
Oh,
couple of times.
Then I'm not sure what exactly is going on there.
Yeah, because we should have.
I do know
There it is. There it is. So now it's there. I thought I had opened that table a couple of times, but so what Tom was saying, you guys, is that at first look, this list of the events that I could manually trigger were for some reason not being updated from the events that I had previously in my event manager table. But now it's there. Thanks, Tom.
So the reason it didn't update was because that window is open and you just reopened it from select order, which means
yes.
don't reload the code, just give it a new query for a new order ID. So it never got. So if you'd actually closed the window and reopened it, it would have worked.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. So now the status has been changed to auto balance. I just heard my audible that tells me that the email was sent. The order received email was sent. Now, in that case, you guys, I did the manual trigger. Remember, I did the right click and trigger. I also wanted to show you in the commands file from the way I triggered it before when I brought the command file in to dp2. I wanted to show you this trigger, very simple in your commands.txt file, a very simple trigger order received event for this particular order.
And that call would have been looking for, you know, spelled correctly and no space.
Exactly. So this one was relative to the order received event I had before. You're right. Yeah. Where in this case, Tom, could I just modify this to go ahead and look at this event ID?
No, because you can't have a subroutine call. It's got a space in the middle.
Okay.
Now, since I've actually already changed dp2, so you can't create an event ID with a space in it.
Okay.
So you'll never get into trouble again with that.
Oh, so you're saying that in the release that everyone gets, you will not be able to have a space in your event ID. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. Well, good to know. Thanks for mentioning that here, because I've been putting spaces in mine all along, so I appreciate that. Okay, guys, so I wanted to show you, first of all, that events workflow. Then I wanted to backtrack and show you how to actually add a couple of events. And the same would hold true for, let me do the export images one. I have a couple more minutes to show you one more. I think this is a cool one to let you know that's in there. Exports and zips. I'll say that's order and main. Enable it, right click, and then it's under the render action. So the code is right in the system for you guys to go ahead and create a zip file, delete the directory and the images that were used to create the zip file. That's why it says zip and delete. So we have that code in for you here. In fact, if any of you guys were in the first micro learning session that I did earlier this year on events, we did not have this right click zip and delete action. So some of you on the call might remember that after the call, I sent you guys a script file that you used in your process after tab on your export images. So you know, that kind of lends itself to how we need you guys to help us with the momentum and help us keep things growing and moving forward, because it will be with your implementation of events and your opportunities for events that we've not yet thought of, that we don't have a right click action to put in there for you. I mean, certainly you could edit these actions, you could enter your own, you could create your own, but you guys always come up with fantastic ideas for us that allow us to put additional information, additional actions in the system that are not only good for you, but for other customers as well. So please keep us abreast of what your needs might be as you start implementing events in your own system. So I'm getting to a point where I have to wrap up this session, you guys, before transitioning to layout design features and functions. So if I could, I'm looking at your list of names here. Can I open up the phone line for anyone, for a question, for a comment? Or Sue, if anybody has a question that's come in that you want to share, that would be awesome.
Nope, nothing else has come in so far.
Okay,
Just
thanks.
one quickie there, Kathy. If you go back to the event manager window.
Sure.
Just wanted to clarify for something about the way this all works. If you put your tooltip over the after column,
Yeah.
this will explain a little bit about trying to get certain things to happen before the other. So basically, if it's a 0 in the after column, then all action IDs of a particular event ID can run in parallel. Meaning if I had 3 workers and you had 3 actions, like you did in your first example before you deleted them all, all three of those could have run simultaneously in three different workers. So if you need to make sure that something happens after something else, that's when you start filling in the after column, and it's after something in the sequence column. So you'd want to sequence your three different steps, and if the third one couldn't happen until the second one finished, then for the third one in the after column, you would have put the sequence number of the second one.
Sure. Great.
Because otherwise, if you don't do anything, all these things run in parallel. Now, she only had one worker, so they kind of ran sequentially, you know, one
Sure.
after the other. But if she had multiple workers, they would have all happened at once.
Perfect. Well, that's a great way to wrap that up, Tom.